I graduated from Howard University, which was gave me the greatest experience in my life. I had succeeded as a student in Jamaica, and I was supposed to come to the United States to become a dentist. I didn't like that idea, so I became a biomedical scientist instead. The Howard experience was wonderful to me because it sort of opened my eyes to the whole situation of civil rights and slavery and other aspects that affected Black people in this country. There I learned, I was experienced great thinkers and individuals who helped my mind, and association with people like Stokely Carmichael and others that helped me to get an idea of what civil rights situation was, and Jim Crow, everything. I spent 25 years in the world of high academia. I was very fortunate. I got a scholarship to go to Brown University and graduated as the second Black to have graduated in the biomedical sciences from Brown University. I left Brown University and I spent a couple of years in Africa, in France, doing research on cancer and reproductive biology and that sort of a thing. I left France and University of Paris, and I went to Harvard to teach for 2 years. And from Harvard, I gained a full-time job at the University of Chicago in the biomedical sciences. I spent 7 years there as the youngest tenured professor at that university at that time. This is a time where John Hope Franklin and I and a couple others were amongst the four Blacks at the institution. That was a great experience. It was not satisfying because I didn't feel that I was making any contributions to the world or to Black people at that school. I was put out about 7,000 white physicians that came across me as a teacher there. I got a job as a head of the department at Howard University. This job was what I call totally full-time. It was quite an experience to shift gears down, in a sense, in the academic world and the research world, but we're still able to slumber along, getting good stuff out in research activities and so on. But what it did is that it opened my mind to the greater world of slavery and civil rights and the effects of slavery in the Black population. I decided at that time that I wanted to have a new life. I wanted to experience again an agrarian type of existence, and so we decided to look around to find an area in Montgomery County, close to Washington, that we could have a farm. So Sandy Spring was ideal. Had the right kind of a people. They were not aggressive. They they were willing to talk and listen and even accept a foreigner in their midst. And so I decided to build a farm. And the farm was very successful on offered land here. And this farm was to prove one point, is that on an acre of land, you could produce enough protein to feed a village in Africa if you did it right. And we were very successful. We had 28 goats and sheep and a couple muted donkeys and llamas and stuff. It became a petting farm. And the neighbors were very much interested. The kids would come around, and they were very much intrigued. The neighborhood didn't deny us having this farm. Anyway, it got a bit too much work. And my brother he was a surgeon in DC, and he left me alone. And me and my mother, we couldn't handle it. And fell down a couple of times, and found it almost knocked out, and found the stairs and eating corn out of the bag on my back. We went on and decided, well, this was it. We gave away all the animals just to other neighbors who would want to keep them and so forth, and decided what was the next step. Next step was that I started to read about Sandy Spring, started to read the annals of Sandy Spring from the Quaker point of view, started to think that here was an opportunity to read and write and think about ourselves. So in the 80s, I had enough time from my job, having spent 11 years as head of the department there at Howard University. I had enough time to start reading about Sandy Spring. Spent a lot of time at the old Sandy Spring Museum in Olney, reading the annals of Sandy Spring, getting to know the Quakers, getting to know about the Quakers, getting to understand the Quaker-Black relationships in the area. Felt I understood them well. I felt that we wanted to hear and study the Sandy Spring Blacks from the Black perspective, not just from the Quaker perspective, but from the Black perspective, and to learn to respect the ordeals that the settlers had to go through and how they survived against all odds. So we decided, the community decided that they would like to see a swimming pool, but that was too dangerous, and so that didn't matter. My brother, who was very busy, said, let's put two containers together, wrap them around and call it a museum. But I had a very intelligent mother who said, none of that. Let's just do it. If you're going to do it, let's do it right. And so we decided to do it right. I had amassed a large collection of African art and demonstrating the diaspora, the Black diaspora. And I figured that that would be one basis of the museum. 1 foot, the diaspora, 1 foot. The second foot would be the people themselves. We decided that we would show that we were serious about it. So we took 18 months to build that clipper ship that you see out there. It was built to scale with the aid of a Quaker carpenter. We built the scale of a clipper ship that would have about 300 slaves in it and would be active not just on the East African slave trade, but in the slave trade, in the transatlantic slave trade as well. They were like the fast clippers that were built by the white people and the Christians up there in Baltimore and in Massachusetts, Brown University, and all those people. We decided that we were going to have this slave and we're going to man it with figures of real slaves placed there as mannequins inside the ship. That took 18 months. And the folks, of course, would ridicule the idea. They say what they're doing is as a child's play pen, or where they're going to put a ship in Sandy Spring. Then we decided that when Mandela got released from jail, that we wanted to honor him based on this culture and to show the example of somebody who had superseded all sorts of disastrous situations in his country. And got interested in the old apartheid movement. And so we built that round cabin here. It's an Ndebele hut, a hut that type of hut that Mandela was born in and lived until he was 11 years old. And it houses all sorts of African art from the diaspora. The opportunity came later on, again, to purchase a log cabin, a famous log cabin from the Hallowell Mansion in Olney. And so we decided to buy they were going to burn this cabin. We decided that we were going to buy it in pieces and then resettle it back here on the property. Now, Mr. Hallowell was a good Quaker. He was president of the University of Maryland Agricultural College. But he didn't take the job until they had emancipated the slaves from that college. And I must point out that there were very few individuals here in the community who had any money to help. but they didn't need the money. We had their trust, and and you don't take one person to found a museum. You take a whole village to found the museum, as I saw it. And so people like Georgiana Campbell, who was very much interested in the project, and she tried as much as she could to bring some funds from her friends to build this museum in the early 80s, about 82 or so. And what the first thing to do was to, as I said, to acquire the support and the confidence of the people in the area. But and then once that was done, we sort of leaped. Piece of land became available. A fellow named Large Hackett decided that he wanted out of Sandy Spring, and it was a 1 acre lot, and it was ideal to me. It was right on the main road, and I was so happy that, I said all the conveniences was there. It wasn't after I bought this land that I realized that there were no municipal conveniences. You still had well and septic, and you had to go through a hell of a lot to get permits. Montgomery County didn't want to give us a permit. They put every obstacle in front of us to get this permit. And even after we had built the outer buildings on the property, and we had built the building itself, then they said the last thing, you have no running water here. What you would do in case of a fire, you couldn't put the fire out, and that was bad for the community. And so we had to again stop and think and decide that we're going to fight them. We're going to build this tank, this holding tank for 25,000 gallons of water, so they could not deny us. But still they tried to deny, because they just didn't really want the foothold to be built here. And so we had the outer buildings built, and then it took 3 years later before we could amass the funds to build the build the building itself. So we built the foundation and covered it with a blue tarp for 3 years. Then for 3 years. But then that's when the breakthrough came. We had to find individuals now and the funds to build building from this concrete base here. And an angel named Mabel Thomas, and the real angel was her sister Alice Thomas. And Alice Thomas said, we can find $15,000. Don't we, Wheezy? And she was taken back for a while. And then she said, yes, we can find $15,000 to build a roof on this thing. And so we had laborers, or a family, 2 brothers named Lee, and they were builders. From then on, we got the structures, the 2x4s and everything up. And Mr. Johnson, Stanley Johnson, and myself spent hours and hours putting nails into the rafters, and that account for his bad knees, for the rest of his life, But he was crouching in all sorts of ways up in the rafters. But we had enough nails into the rafters, and so they finally gave us the permit to use the building. We had to get artifacts that would be attractive and would really qualify the place as a museum. So we concentrated on getting slave documents that we had collected over 40 years. And the slave documents formed the basis of the reason for having a museum. Over the period, we decided to have, again, push the African diasporic connection here, which was very important, because here you have now the 1619 project that is famous at this time, but we wanted to go back to deal with the whole subject of slavery before 1619, much before that, 600 years before, after Columbus and on, and to show the connection of slavery not just with Sandy Spring, but slavery with the African diaspora you know. And so we continue to build the linkages, the literature, the basis of books that would deal with it, and effigies that would deal with the Atlantic crossing and of the settlement of the freed slaves, freed Africans in the area here. So it was spent mostly having visages that the public could see and appreciate. We were very busy with school children. And first, it was just very interestingly, it was just mostly the white school children that would be visiting here. And then it grew to a point when we could hardly handle the numbers of Montgomery County school children and children from Washington, young people coming to the museum. Not to forget the adults who would be here on a regular basis. And that has not diminished. And that is I think, one of the main purposes of the museum here. It has to serve the children, to serve the youth, to remind them of what slavery is, and to show slavery in its, I don't want to say in its nastiest shape, but in its real shape. You know, they ought to understand the sounds of slavery, what went on. Sure, it causes some disturbance in their minds a bit, even with the adults. We have individuals who come here and read, and then they and see the objects, and then they cry, you know, what have they done to our ancestors, and so on. But the important part that I think it is that you're going to be real. You're not going to be dealing with DeSantis in Florida to have some fake story that is never told. I think we have to bring in the facts that we want the museum to exemplify. You can come and you can learn, and you can respect and understand the work and the effort that the trustees, the Blacks, had in surviving in the area. And you can appreciate and memorialize it. And that is the most beautiful thing that the current leaders of this museum have done. They have put form to sound. They can now listen back to the voices and see the images of some of those ancestors as best they can, and hear their story and appreciate what they went through to build this place. And so that's what the leadership is, I hope, will continue to expound on. I myself I'm saying goodbye.